Hello friends, welcome to another lecture, what could be possibly the last one on dislocations. So in the previous lecture, we tried to relate the plastic deformation as a whole to that of the dislocation. If you could recollect, the plastic strain, we expressed it as a parameter that is proportional to, or a response of a material that is proportional to the dislocation density and the average distance covered by the dislocations that is present in the system. Now, the amount of plastic strain that you observe in the material is proportional to the number of dislocations that is present in the material and the average distance that is covered by the material. So, when the number of dislocations are constant, by increase in the average distance covered by the dislocation, you can increase the plastic deformation. And similarly, when the average distance is constant, then by just increasing the number of dislocations that is present in the system, you can improve the plastic deformation of the material. Now, supposing you are in a condition or you have a material wherein the propagation of the dislocation is not that easy, because dislocation needs specific systems to propagate. We call that as a slip system, a combination of direction and a plane. So when that combination of direction and plane is not possible, then the mobility of the dislocation is restricted. So for a given number of dislocations, when its mobility is restricted, then ultimately your plastic strain would be restricted, and this is what we observe in case of the brittle material. Now, for a given ductile material, a material that can exhibit a significant amount of plastic deformation, even though you can enhance the plasticity by increasing the number of dislocations, these dislocations interact with each other and thereby they restrict the average distance covered by each of these dislocations, or average distance that is covered by the dislocation as a whole. So by increasing the number of dislocation, you are in a way restricting the mobility of the dislocations. So in that case, in order to add to the existing plastic deformation, you need to increase the amount of stress that you impose on the material. So when your mobility of the dislocation that translates to the plastic strain is restricted, you need to increase in order to enhance the mobility of the dislocation. Unlike the brittle materials, wherein there are not much paths for the dislocation to propagate, there are materials where there are paths for the dislocation to propagate. However, because of the increased number of dislocations, because of the interaction between these dislocations, these pathways are restricted. So you need to add to the existing amount of stress that you have imposed. So this is what we refer to as the strain hardening. So just by relating dislocation to that of the plastic strain, we have now understood two physical phenomena. One, the behavior of the brittle material, and the strain hardening concepts. So this is one critical takeaway from our understanding of, or from our relating the dislocation to that of the plastic deformation. Even though this expression we arrived by considering a representative setup, this representative derivation, it enables us to gain two physical concepts, understanding on the two physical concepts. One is the strain hardening, the other is the nature of the brittle material, or why the brittle material behaves in this manner. Now, in the previous lecture, we saw that there are possible ways these dislocations can nucleate without the introduction of the stress. So if you could recollect, the nucleation of the dislocation we saw in the previous lecture can be due to thermal, or due to the concentration of stress. So this concentration of stress might be due to thermal gradient or the difference in the crystal structure composition. So this should be and or composition and or the lattice parameter. So when you have a multi-phase system, and in the multi-phase system you have different phases with different crystal structure under or composition under or lattice parameters interacting with each other, they lead to the accumulation of stress, and this accumulation of stress or concentration of stress might lead to the nucleation of dislocation. And during the processing techniques, there might be thermal gradient that is present in one uniform homogeneous system that might lead to the concentration of thermal concentration or nucleation of dislocation through the concentration of stresses. Secondly, we have impingement of the nuclei. So when you have, again, during a processing technique, if you have different nuclei that are being formed, and then this nuclei, they grow and then they impinge with each other because of their difference in the crystal orientation, crystallographic orientation rather. In addition to the grain boundaries, the dislocation also are introduced along the surrounding the or adjacent to that of the grain boundaries. Now, even when you don't have two nuclei that exhibit a significant amount of difference in the crystallographic orientation, depending on the difference in the lattice parameters, it is also possible to have dislocations or introduce dislocations. This dislocations which are introduced due to the difference in the lattice parameter, not primarily because of the crystallographic orientation, but due to the lattice parameter. So in addition to the crystallographic orientation, the dislocations can be introduced when two nuclei with different lattice parameter but uniform concentration, uniform lattice or similar crystallographic orientation, when these two nuclei, when they interact or when they impinge, can lead to the formation of dislocations. So this dislocation are primarily introduced because of the difference in the lattice parameter, not primarily due to the difference in the crystallographic orientation. So such dislocations are referred to as the misfit dislocations. So misfit dislocations, they are characterized by, or they are introduced when two nuclei that are impinging have different lattice parameters. Finally, when you have an increased amount of vacancies, the interaction between this increased amount of vacancies can eventually lead to the formation of dislocations. Now, these dislocations are introduced into the system as a form of a defect. It is important for us to remember that even though there is a concentration of stress that is involved, this stress is an internal stress. So the material is undergoing a change. We are imposing a thermal condition, or a material is undergoing a change, and this change happens internally, and because of that you have the concentration of stress, and this concentration of stress leads to the nucleation of dislocation. And similarly, in the other case, you have a specific processing technique that introduces nuclei. It could be solidification, recrystallization, whatever it is. Then these nuclei, they impinge, that lead to the dislocation and vacancies. So all these are not formed because you impose an external stress. These are formed within the material and because of the condition that the material is exposed to, or because of the changes that the material experiences internally. So you have internal stress, you have nuclei, and you have vacancies. All that happens internally within the materials. Now, unless otherwise the stress is imposed, the external stress is imposed, or an external mechanical condition is imposed, these dislocations stay within the system as a defect. And only when you impose an external stress, this dislocation begins to move and bring about a plastic deformation in the material. So it is important for us to note that even though these nucleations of dislocations, so whatever ways we have considered so far, we have considered three different ways these dislocations can nucleate. Even though they nucleate because of the internal change within the material, these dislocations play a role. They begin to play a role once you impose a mechanical condition onto the material. Once you impose stress onto the material, these dislocations begin to play a role. And that is the reason why it is important for us to consider the nucleation of the dislocations. Let me repeat. We saw the plastic strain is directly proportional to that of the number of dislocation density, or the number of dislocations rather. Now, when you impose a mechanical condition, in addition to the nucleation of the dislocation because of the imposition of the external stress, these dislocations which are already present in the system because of these different processes. So because of these different events, the nucleation or dislocations might already be present into the system. And once you impose an external stress, these dislocations become active. They move away from their nucleated zone or from that nucleation site, and they become active and they begin to propagate, thereby increasing the dislocation density and thereby enhancing the plastic deformation or plastic strain. So what we essentially have is, in addition to the dislocations that are introduced by the external stress alone. There are dislocations that are implicitly present within the system, but these dislocations, unless otherwise you impose an external stress, they are present as a defect alone. Like vacancies, they are present as a defect alone. And when you begin to apply an external stress, they begin to get activated, they begin to move, thereby increasing the or thereby enhancing the plastic deformation by increasing the dislocation density. So when you have a dislocation that is confined to an interface region, when you have a dislocation that is confined to a grain boundary, you cannot distinguish the grain boundary from that of the dislocation to which it is confined to. Only when you apply an external stress, these dislocation begins to move away from their nucleation side, and they begin to appear as an individual dislocation, thereby increasing the dislocation density, which ultimately enhances our plastic strain. So therefore, it is important for us to understand the nucleation of the dislocation, and that is the reason why we spend time to consider what are the different events that introduces dislocation into the system. These events, even though they are not directly related to the external stress that we impose onto the system, they introduce dislocation which become active when you impose an external stress, and that enhances the plastic strain. Now, so far, like what was said earlier, we have not considered the formation of dislocation when the stress is imposed. So let us consider one condition where the external stress that is imposed lead to the formation of dislocation. So when you impose an external stress, the dislocations, they largely form at what we call as the stress concentrator. So when you impose an external load, the dislocation, because of the external load, they begin to form at stress concentrators. So this stress concentrators is nothing but an existing inhomogeneity in the system. So supposing you have a homogeneous system that does not have any defect in it. So we have considered such a system earlier, which was just a cube, and we began to impose an external mechanical condition. So in that case, we saw the dislocation, it began at the surface. So the inhomogeneity was disrupted by the surface, and therefore the dislocation originated from the surface. However, in the physical world, we have different defects or other phases, including that disrupt the homogeneity. And these defects, or rather these factors, microscopic factors rather, you can call that, these factors or features that disrupts the homogeneous nature of the material, they in most cases act as the stress concentrators. And when you impose a stress onto the material, when you impose a mechanical condition to the material, in these features, in these, let's say, microscopic features, the stress begins to concentrate, ultimately leading to the formation of dislocation, and that is what we refer to as the stress concentrators. So in addition to all these factors that implicitly introduce dislocation into the material, we have, because of the microstructure of the material, or because of the nature of the material, if there is any defect or any feature of the material that introduces inhomogeneity, that feature acts as the stress concentrator, and that stress concentrator plays an important role in nucleating dislocation when an external stress is imposed. So in these conditions, the nucleation of dislocation does not need any external stress. So external stress is not required in this case. However, in this case it is required, and external stress here, it nucleates dislocation at specific points. That is nothing but a feature that disrupts the homogeneous nature of the system. In most cases, these could be grain boundaries, these could be surfaces, and these also could be precipitates. So these features, they often disrupt the homogeneity of the system, and when you impose a stress, and these features ultimately lead or act as the site for the nucleation of dislocation. Now, experimentally, the nucleation of dislocation at these sites have been observed. Now, when you consider a microstructure, and when you are able to identify, for instance, a precipitate in that microstructure, one can closely look into the precipitate while applying an external stress and see how the region around the precipitate deforms when you impose an external mechanical condition. And through that, people were able to identify the deformation surrounding the precipitate that acts as the stress concentrator, and they were able to identify the nature, the physical nature of the dislocation that is observed during the imposition of the external stress. So what we have is, supposing you have a surface of a precipitate which acts as the stress concentrator, and now when this precipitate, or in the material which consists of this precipitate, an external stress is applied, then you have the dislocation that forms of this form. So a dislocation of this form begins to appear. So what we have is, we have identified that in a material, in a physical material, whenever you have a stress concentrator, say for instance a precipitate, in that precipitate you would have an essential formation of the dislocation. So when you impose a stress near this precipitate, you would have the formation of the dislocation. And so we have focused on the region around the precipitate to understand how the dislocation is forming. And when you do that, when you physically observe how the dislocation is formed around the precipitate, the moment you impose a stress, a dislocation line of this form begins to appear. Now this dislocation line, it comprises of the edge and the screw dislocation. And this they were able to identify by considering the distortion that is surrounding this dislocation line, and this more comprised of the edge and the screw dislocation. Now, when you keep on increasing or keep on imposing the mechanical condition, what was observed is that this dislocation line, it evolved in a specific manner, meaning while the section of the dislocation line, which was predominantly edge dislocation, so we have a dislocation line that contains combination of edge and screw dislocation. The section of the dislocation line that was predominantly edge dislocation in nature, it began to move in this direction. However, the section of the dislocation line that was predominantly screw dislocation in nature, that began to move in this direction. So double arrow represented by the direction in which the section of the dislocation line that is predominantly screw dislocation in nature, and the single arrow here, it dictates the direction in which the section of the dislocation line that predominantly moves in the direction of the edge dislocation. So because of this migration, both these were observed to be conservative in nature, meaning this particular movement of the dislocation line, the predominantly screw dislocation line, was along a cylinder. So there is a cylinder which can be constructed, and this dislocation line, and particularly the section with the predominant amount of screw dislocation, it began to move along the cylinder. So this section is it's a part of the prismatic dislocation, and that is the reason why its conservative movement was along the cylinder, which we refer to as the glide surface. If you could recollect, that is what we saw in the previous lecture. Now, because of this movement, what we observe is the dislocation line now assumes a shape something like this. So what you have is, so the dotted lines, it encircles the cylinder. So the dislocation line, which was in this form, now have adopted a particular form because of the different direction in which the dislocation line moves. The predominantly screw dislocation, it moves along the glide surface, and the predominantly edge dislocation, it moves in this direction. So the shape now has changed from this random shape to a shape that is short of a loop. Now ultimately you have a section of the dislocation that is moving in this direction and a section of the dislocation that is moving in this direction. So it began in this way. So you have a predominantly edge dislocation region moving in this direction, screw dislocation moving in this direction. So this ultimately leads to a shape like this. So if you want, so this shape is along the glide surface, along the cylinder, because the screw dislocation, it undergoes conservative movement along the glide surface. So the shape is something like this. So this is the cylinder. So this is surrounding the surface of the cylinder. So this is dislocation. Let me write here. So this is the dislocation line, and the blue one is the glide surface, that is the cylinder, and this red line surrounds the surface of the cylinder, and this section that is migrating in this direction is predominantly screw dislocation. Now this section is migrating in this direction and this section is migrating in this direction. So both are predominantly screw dislocation, and they are migrating in the opposite directions, so they annihilate with each other. Ultimately what you end up then is surrounding the precipitate, in the region adjacent to the precipitate, along the glide surface, you have the formation of a dislocation loop. Now this is how we end up having what we refer to as the dislocation loop. Now when you impose a external stress, the external stress introduces dislocation onto the material, and it does not introduce the dislocation homogeneously all through the material, but it introduces in specific spots, and these spots are referred to as the stress concentrators. These stress concentrators can be any feature, any microscopic feature or any material feature, structural feature that disrupts the homogeneous nature of the material, and the dislocation that surrounds or that originate from the stress concentrator, it begins in the form of a dislocation line that is not a loop in nature. However, as it grows, because this dislocation line, it comprises of edge and screw dislocation, this dislocation line takes a specific path on a specific direction to move, and because of the specific direction in which the dislocation line moves, you ultimately end up forming a dislocation loop. So therefore, in addition to our basic axiom or basic consideration that the dislocation cannot stop within the grain or within a material, it has either to interact with the grain boundary or with the surface, or it should form a loop. This shows, the experimental observation shows that when a dislocation is formed around a stress concentrator, when you impose a stress and the dislocation is nucleated around a stress concentrator, it ultimately leads to the formation of dislocation loop. Now this is the way a dislocation loop is introduced into the system. So this has been experimentally observed. Now in addition to the nature or the primary factor that governs the formation of the dislocation loop, that is particularly the difference in the amount of edge and screw dislocation in the dislocation line. So there are sections wherein you have significant amount of screw dislocation, and there are sections like the property of the dislocation line in that region is close to that of the screw dislocation, and in case of the other section of the dislocation line, it is close to that of the edge dislocation. So we saw, depending on the angle between the Burgers vector and the dislocation line, we can ascertain how much of which dislocation is present. So in a dislocation line, it is possible to have a section that is predominantly screw dislocation, a section that is predominantly edge dislocation. So depending on this difference, you have the different propagation of the dislocation line. So dislocation line, it adopts a specific path to propagate, and because of this path, you ultimately end up having a dislocation loop. So this is the way how physically the dislocation loop is formed. So in addition to all the other considerations, physically this is how the dislocation loop is formed. This dislocation loop, now it is important to understand, is formed around the stress concentrator when you impose a mechanical condition. So this dislocation loop is formed as a response to the mechanical condition that you impose. So in addition to this observation, it is also possible for us to understand why the dislocation loops form instead of any other shape or just a line. Why this dislocation loops form? By considering the energy that is introduced into the system. Now we saw in the previous lecture, unlike the vacancies or interstitial, the dislocations are not stable defect, meaning when for a particular concentration of vacancies, the energy of the system remains undisturbed for a given temperature. However, when you have the dislocation that is introduced into the material, the energy of the system, it varies. Now what we need to ensure is, or what dislocation ensures is, by its propagation, by its growth, what the dislocation need to ensure is that the energy, even though it is introduced into the system, it should be minimal, and that is the reason why we have a specific slip plane and the slip direction. Even though because of the dislocation the energy is increased in the system, this increase in the energy needs to be minimal, and that is the reason why we have the slip system. And the same argument can be made to the formation of the dislocation loop. So instead of going into the overall derivation, let me just give you an expression that relates or quantifies the energy introduced by the dislocation loop. So this is given by E 1 by 2 GB square R ln r by r naught minus pi r square tau b. Now, so this is b here, this is just nothing but it's this b here. These two b's, they are nothing but the magnitude of the Purvis vector at a given point of the dislocation loop. This r is the radius of the dislocation loop at a given moment. This tau here is the stress that is imposed in order for the dislocation loop to be introduced and subsequent growth of the dislocation loop. Now G is nothing but the shear modulus, and R naught is the radius of the dislocation core. So you have a dislocation core, and that is surrounding the dislocation line, the primary line that you have, and that the radius of that is referred to as the dislocation core. Now this energy surrounding the dislocation loop can be expressed in this manner, and as you can see, in the initial case when you have the when the dislocation loop forms, the R is quite small. Initially R, the radius of the dislocation loop, is small, so therefore R square will be even smaller. So in that case, this term here, the second term here, will play a negligible role. So initial case, so when you treat the initial case in red, rather when you have the initial condition that is represented in blue rather, then in the initial case this term doesn't play much of a role because R is small and R square much will be even more smaller. So all the energy is governed by the energy introduced by the dislocation loop is governed by this expression here. However, when you keep on imposing the stress, when the stress increases, which is a component in the second term, when you keep on increasing the amount of stress that you impose in order to bring about the plastic deformation, and correspondingly R increases, then the second term increasingly becomes more dominant. So therefore the second term involves a negative sign here. So therefore the second term helps us reduce the overall energy that is introduced by the dislocation loop. So initially, even though the dislocation loop introduces or increases the considerable amount of energy of the system, as the dislocation loop grows by the increase in the stress, and as the R consequently grows because of the increase in the stress and consequent growth of the dislocation loop, what you end up having is the second term attempts to reduce the overall energy of the system. So therefore there is an interplay between the size of the dislocation loops that attempts to reduce the overall energy of the system, and also the first term that attempts to increase the overall energy of the system. So you have the interplay between the first term here and the second term here. This interplay ultimately ensures the minimal amount of energy increase during the growth of the dislocations. So you have first term that plays a vital role in the initial stages because R is low at the initial stages, so R square is low, so you have to get rid of that term, or that term plays a negligible role. However, when the stress increases, this term becomes dominant, or this term begins to play a critical role. So you have two competing terms, one and the other, the first term and the second term. So this term, they interact with each other, and ultimately the resultant of this two terms, or the interaction between the two terms, or the interplay between the two terms, is what we have the overall change in the growth of the dislocation loop, nucleation and growth of the dislocation loop. And therefore, because of this nature, or because of the way the dislocation loop handles the change in the energy of the system, the formation of dislocation loop is preferred during the plastic deformation. So in addition to our observation of the formation of the dislocation loop, because of the way the dislocation line moves, we have an energy based argument for the formation of the dislocation loop, and this is primarily because of the interplay. Because as the dislocation loop grows with the increase in the amounts of stress, the overall energy is considerably reduced, and because of the reduction of the energy, because of due to the growth of the dislocation loop, and with increase in the amount of stress that you impose, we have an energetically favored form of a dislocation that is growing, which is nothing but the dislocation loop. So what we have so far seen is we have related the plastic strain to that of the dislocations. From that we have understood the concept, or we have just related the concept of brittle material and the strain hardening to it. We saw there are different ways the dislocation can implicitly nucleate within the material even without an external stress acting on it. Even though this increases the amount of dislocation that is present in the system, they become active only when you impose an external stress, and therefore these dislocations which were inert or dormant at the initial stage, once you begin to impose an external stress, they become active and they propagate, thereby enhancing the plastic deformation of the material. In addition to this implicit dislocations which were formed without the imposition of the external stress, there is also a dislocation that forms when you impose an external stress, or due to the mechanical condition there is a dislocation that is formed, and this dislocation it forms around or adjacent to the stress concentrator. And when you consider how the dislocation forms around the stress concentrator, we saw the dislocation that forms around the stress concentrator because of the imposition of the external stress, it forms in the form of a dislocation loop. Now, in addition to our physical observation of the formation of the dislocation loop, which is primarily because of the difference in the direction in which the dislocation loop propagates depending on the nature of the section of the dislocation loop, we saw the formation of the dislocations loop is also energetically favored because of this expression here, because when a dislocation loop grows, it reduces the overall energy that is introduced by the formation of the dislocation in the first place. Now all this we have seen in the context of the expression wherein you relate the number density or the density of the dislocation to that of the plastic deformation. Now, in addition to the nucleation of the dislocation, which ultimately increases the dislocation density, there is also another phenomena that increases the number of dislocations, or that increases the dislocation density, and this is referred to as the multiplication of dislocation. So, in addition to introducing dislocation out of nowhere, that means in addition to nucleating the dislocations from specific regions and making it active, the number of dislocation in a system can be increased by the multiplication of the existing dislocations. So this also increases consequently the overall density of the dislocation, thereby enhancing the plasticity or the plastic deformation of the material. So therefore, when we want to relate the dislocation to that of the plastic deformation, then it is also important for us to consider the multiplication of the dislocations, because they ultimately increase the density of the dislocation or dislocation density that eventually contributes to the plastic strain. Now the multiplication of the dislocation, one can begin to understand that by considering the nucleation of dislocation. So we saw, without the imposition of the external stress, without imposing any external stress, the dislocation can be introduced into the system by different factors. You have thermal gradient, you have the impingement of the nuclei, you have vacancies interacting with each other. So these different factors, they ultimately contribute to the nucleation of dislocation. However, these dislocations which are nucleated or which are introduced by these factors other than the stress that we impose, these dislocations are not perfect in nature, they are not pure, meaning these dislocations that are introduced because in other phenomena other than the external stress, that the one that we have considered, the nucleation of this dislocation, it is not confined to a specific plane. So when you have a nucleation, or when your dislocation nucleates because of the impingement of the grains, because of the impingement of the nuclei, the dislocation that results from the impingement of the nuclei does not necessarily confine to that of the slip plane. So it may not follow a definite array. It might not, the dislocation line that is resulting from the impingement of the nuclei, for example, or the dislocation that is resulting from the thermal gradient, for example. So this dislocation, it is not necessary they form in the slip system, they form in the slip plane, or they lie in a particular set of planes. So this dislocations that form from the other factors, like because of the stress concentration, impingement, these dislocation might lie across different planes and some may lie in the slip plane and some may not lie in the slip plane. So a simpler example is a dislocation can be of this form, wherein you have a section AB. So this is a dislocation line. ABC is a dislocation line. This dislocation has been introduced because of the other factors. So that this particular dislocation ABC has been introduced because of the other factors that we have considered. So the different factors like the concentration of stress, impingement of the nuclei, and the vacancies. So these factors have implicitly introduced a nuclear dislocation into the system, and this dislocation does not lie in a definite plane. So in that case, what essentially happens is that, so if we assume the section of the dislocation, that is AB, it does not lie on the slip plane, or more generally in the slip system. Now when you begin to apply or impose a mechanical condition, even though this is a dislocation, it will not be able to move because it does not lie in the slip plane or the slip system. On the other hand, if BC lies on the slip system, then the BC, with respect to the external stress that you impose, can move. However, the AB cannot move. So you have a single dislocation line, and there is a segment of the dislocation line that cannot move because it is not present in the slip system. However, we have another section of the dislocation line that is present in the slip system, so therefore it can move. Now you have a relative movement of one section of the dislocation line with respect to the other section. So if you impose an external stress, say tau. Now this section of the dislocation line, considering that it can move because of its presence in the slip system, and this we refer to as the glissine section of the dislocation. So this glissine section of the dislocation, it can move, and its movement is rather restricted by the presence of AB, which is sessile in nature. So this restricted movement of the section of the dislocation, it moves along an elliptical path or a circular path, and since it is confined to the slip plane and it is restricted by the sessile section of the dislocation line, that is AB, the path is not as similar to that of the other dislocations that is easy or that is free to move. So this path would generally be spiral in nature for this consideration. It is circular initially, and when you keep on increasing the stress, it becomes spiral. And this spiral or this movement of the dislocation, when it circles and compacts to its original position, we have an event that is similar to the annihilation, and the first spiral, it moves away, leading to the formation of a dislocation loop. So the first loop is formed when the BC completes one rotation, because you have a section of the dislocation and a section, it moves in a specific plane in restricted manner, and it completes one rotation. And this rotated dislocation, it moves away in an event that is similar to that of the annihilation. Of course, in this consideration, even though it is difficult for us to understand how the first dislocation loop separates itself from the existing ABC dislocation, this is the principle, or this helps us understand the principle of the multiplication of dislocation. Even though in this consideration of ABC, it is difficult for us to understand the multiplication of the dislocations, because we need to understand how this particular BC, the section of the ABC dislocation, moves when it is pinned by AB. It is difficult for us to conceive, but it gives us an idea, the fundamental reason for the multiplication of the dislocation. When you have a dislocation, that is, a section of it does not move, is sessile in nature, a section of it is glissile in nature. So based on this understanding, we can consider a simple setup. So we have an understanding that the dislocation of the two main understanding is that you can have a dislocation that has a section that lies in the slip plane and the other section that does not lie in the slip plane. The section that lies on the slip plane is easy for it to move. The section that does not lie on the slip plane, it doesn't move, so that is sessile in nature. And the second one is, or the second fundamental understanding that we can gain from that, from this concentration, is that even though BC is a part of the ABC dislocation and AB is immobile, the BC, because it is present in the slip system, it can move. Now the similar, you can translate this understanding to a setup like this, wherein you have a dislocation AB, and in the points A and B, this dislocation is pinned. Now you have a dislocation that is pinned at A and B. Now when you begin to impose a stress, this dislocation, it begins to move, but since AB, this begins to grow, but since AB is pinned, the growth will be in this manner. And when you continue to impose the stress, and since the AB remains pinned, the growth of the dislocation will be in this manner. So the growth will be surrounding the pinned section of the dislocation. And when you keep on imposing the stress, so you still have the pinned points A and B, and the dislocation surrounding it will grow in this manner. And now you have a section of the dislocation that is moving in this direction and a section of the dislocation that is moving in this direction. And these two meet, and ultimately what you end up having is a pinned dislocation. So these two meet, and they move in here and they restore the previous dislocation. And because these two meet, they are in opposite direction, they annihilate with each other, so you end up forming a dislocation loop with the precursor of the dislocation loop still present. So you have a precursor of the dislocation loop. Because you impose a stress, this precursor leads to the growth in the dislocation, and it grows in such a manner that it leads to the formation of the dislocation loop, and the precursor is still present. So what you essentially have, you begin with a section of a dislocation that is pinned in 2 points. When you impose the stress, this dislocation line, this dislocation AB, it grows, but still the points A and B are pinned, and they could be pinned because they might lie in a system on a slip, or they might lie on a plane which is not a slip system. So when you impose the stress, it keeps on growing, and it grows considering the pinned section or the pinned points A and B. So the growth is not circular but in this manner, and while growing, when this dislocation line interacts with itself, you have the cancellation of the section because they propagate in a different direction, so they annihilate with each other. You ultimately end up with the formation of the dislocation loop, and you also regain the initial section that is pinned with A and B. So therefore, when you keep on imposing the stress, then this event continues to happen. So as this dislocation grows, you have the formation of, so this dislocation loop which was originally present here will have moved to this region here, and the new dislocation, this will be one, and the new dislocation loop will be formed from AB as the source. So this is based on the fundamental understanding of having a dislocation that is not confined to a specific plane, that has a section that is immobile and a section that is mobile. We can consider, so based on that understanding, we can consider a setup of a dislocation which has 2 points that does not move. So two points in which the dislocation is pinned. And when you consider such a consideration from our understanding of this generalized treatment, when you make such a consideration, you are able to arrive at a mechanism in which you can postulate the multiplication of the dislocations. So this pinned dislocation AB is referred to as the Frank-Reed source. So this Frank-Reed source, which is nothing but a section of the dislocation line that is pinned between 2 points, when you impose the stress, or when stress acts upon this dislocation, or this is Frank-Reed source, you have the formation of the dislocation loop. So the fundamental point, the fundamental aspect that undergoes the formation of the dislocation loop in the Frank-Reed source is that it is possible for the dislocation to have a section that is mobile, a section that is immobile. And because of the movement of the mobile section with respect to the immobile section that is pinning the other section of the dislocation, it is possible for us to have the formation of the dislocation loop. So that initial understanding we gained from the simple setup. You have a section that is immobile, a section that is mobile, and when the mobile section, it moves without disturbing the immobile section, it will lead to the formation of the dislocation loop. So that is the understanding that we gained from this generalized consideration. And if you make it more specific by considering a simple dislocation line pinned at A and B, you end up having the Frank-Reed source. this is generalized consideration. This is specific Frank-Reed source that leads to the progressive formation of the dislocation loop from a simple dislocation line pinned at 2 points. Now the other way of multiplying the dislocation loop is when you have multiple cross events. So we saw that the propagation of the dislocation in addition to the glide can occur in the form of cross. You can have the cross slip of the dislocations. So this primarily happens in the screw dislocation. So when you have a specific slip plane and the dislocation, it propagates in this direction, and now when it comes to a place wherein there are two slip planes interact with each other. So in case of, if you could recall the discussion, the screw dislocation, it's not confined to a specific plane, but it is confined to, or it moves along the family of planes. So a screw dislocation that is propagating, for instance, along the family of plane 1, 1, 1, if it meets with another plane or interacts with another plane which is of this family, and it has a Burgers vector that is favorable for its propagation, then the dislocation moves in this direction, propagates in this direction. So this is we refer to as the cross slip. And we considered that when we have two such events, you ultimately end up having, so let me show the dislocation line in a different color. So what you essentially have is the dislocation which was initially propagating in this direction now begins to propagate in this direction. So the growth is in this direction. Now these two sections of the dislocations are pinned within these two planes. So you have two planes. Initially it was growing in this plane and now it has begun to grow in this plane, but the plane in which it traversed to move from this plane to this plane is now pinned. So this section of the dislocation can lead to the multiplication of the dislocation. This section, which can be treated as a step in the dislocation line, if you could recollect this, we refer to as the jogs, and this can act as the source for the multiplication of the dislocations, because you have a section that is pinned, a section of the dislocation that is pinned when all the other sections are mobile in nature. So when you have a pinned, or rather a pinned section of the dislocation with other sections that are mobile in nature, like we have seen here, it is possible for that section to act as a source of dislocation. So this pinned section then acts as the source for dislocations. So this pinned section is formed when you have a multi-cross slip and particularly this source is referred to as the jogs. So we have two primary source for the multiplication of the dislocation. One is the Frank-Reed source. It is nothing but just a dislocation line which is pinned in the 2 points, and that acts as the source for the multiplication of the dislocation, and the primary consideration is gained from the setup here. Similarly, it is also possible for us to have a source for the multiplication of the dislocation when you have multiple cross slips. So you have double cross slip here, and you have initially the dislocation moving in this plane and now moving in this plane, but in the plane which allowed for the movement of dislocation or shift of dislocation from this plane to this plane is largely immobile. So dislocation line in this plane is largely immobile. So this acts as the step which we call as the jogs, and they act as the source for the multiplication of dislocations. So what we have now seen is that we have seen the different ways in which one can increase the dislocation density, thereby enhancing the overall plastic deformation. So the multiplication of dislocation density can be through multi-cross slip, and it can be also through the Frank-Reed source, which is pinned in the 2 points. Now, in addition to that, we saw the nucleation events. So this nucleation can be without the imposition of the external stress. So this nucleation of dislocation which are formed without the imposition of the external stress, even though they are present in the system, they become active when you begin to impose an external stress. So by increasing the number of dislocation and by considering the moment of dislocation, which we saw in the previous lecture, one can increase or enhance the plastic deformation of the material. So from considering the dislocation as a defect, now we have seen how this defect relates to the plastic deformation. So with that, we will wind up our overall discussion on the dislocations, and we will move to the final module on the testing of materials in the leg structure. Goodbye.